the government's going to do all kinds of things. They've already minted some coins, I think, to commemorate the 250th anniversary. So, putting Donald Trump's face on it wouldn't offend me. I'm sure it would offend people who don't like Donald Trump. I don't think it's...
All right, you guys, we got another controversy involving Donald Trump and America's upcoming 250th anniversary celebration. This time, the debate centers around a proposal for a commemorative $250 bill featuring Donald Trump's face. Now, legally, there are already questions because current law prohibits living people from appearing on U.S. currency, but that's not really what's driving the argument here. The bigger issue is whether Republicans are focusing too much on celebrating Donald Trump himself instead of celebrating the country. And as usual, Scott Jennings is on CNN defending it, while Democrats are arguing this is another example of Trump's personality dominating everything. Let's take a look.
My political sources tonight are Sochi Hinojosa, the former DOJ Director of Public Affairs, who I should note her sister is running as a Democrat for governor of Texas, and also Scott Jennings, who does not have any siblings running as Democrats for governor of Texas, but is the former special assistant to President George W. Bush. Scott, I'll ask you what I asked the other Scott who was in the briefing room today. Do you think politically it's a good idea to put the president's face on a $250 bill right now?
I mean, I think they ought to follow the law, which Scott Bessent clearly laid out. You can't put a living person on money right now. Now the Congress could vote to change that. And it is right for the Treasury Department to be ready to follow the laws that Congress passes. And I kind of agree with Scott Bessent. We're having a 250th anniversary. The government's going to do all kinds of things. They've already minted some coins, I think, to commemorate the 250th anniversary. So, putting Donald Trump's face on it wouldn't offend me. I'm sure it would offend people who don't like Donald Trump. I don't think it's the most pressing issue facing the country right now. But would it surprise me if we did some commemorative items around America 250? No, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Would you criticize President Biden if he had been in office and was putting his face on money?
Look, we put the image of the president of the United States on all kinds of things in this country. It doesn't really bother me. They'll name things after Donald Trump. They'll wind up naming things after Joe Biden. They've named things after Barack Obama. It doesn't offend me one way or the other. And I really think this is a bit of a tempest in a teapot, but I can see why people who don't like Donald Trump like it because, they don't like for his face or his name or for him to be on anything. And so it's another thing for them to complain about. I also think Democrats generally don't want us to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the country. And so they're like offended that we're celebrating America right now. It's another thing for them to be offended about.
This is the argument you're hearing more and more often from Trump's critics. They're saying the issue isn't really the bill itself, it's what the bill symbolizes. Their argument is that while Americans are focused on affordability, housing, groceries, and healthcare, political energy is being spent on symbolic projects that don't directly improve people's lives. Whether you agree or disagree, that's the framing they're using throughout this discussion. But then the panel gets into whether symbols even matter politically.
Sochi, you're the Democrat here.
Democrats want to celebrate the 250th anniversary, Scott, and you know that. I think one interesting thing about all of this is that this isn't the first time. We've seen Donald Trump obsessing over putting his name on the Kennedy Center. He wants to ensure that while his approval rating is at 30%, the reality is that he himself is obsessed with his own image. And so I think, Kaitlan, your questions were spot on in the sense that the American people are struggling every single day. $250 is what it costs in some areas in order to pump gas. A lot of Americans can't necessarily afford it. And the fact that they're now going to have potentially, unless Congress changes the law, a commemorative sort of $250 bill of Donald Trump is just going to remind them every day about how expensive life has been under Donald Trump.
I want both of you to listen to what the Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, had to say about this today.
It's monopoly money. It's fantasy. And we are going to do everything possible to make sure that this never happens. I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. How sycophantic are Republicans when this is what they're focused on, as opposed to actually doing the type of things to address the damage that they've done to the American people? They said they were going to lower costs on day one. Costs haven't gone down. They've gone up. And yet they're focused on a 250 make-believe bill for Donald Trump.
I guess, Scott, to the point that he's making there, when poll numbers show that 77% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, don't think the president's economic policies have done a good job, that they've actually increased their cost of living. How do you think they'll see a moment like?
Now, this is where the conversation immediately becomes political, because notice the argument being made here. It's no longer simply about whether a commemorative item is a good idea or a bad idea. Instead, the claim becomes that opposition to the proposal equals opposition to celebrating America itself. That's a much bigger accusation. And naturally, critics are going to push back, because there's a difference between saying, I don't like this idea, and saying, I don't want to celebrate the country's anniversary. Those aren't necessarily the same thing. And the Democratic response focuses on something completely different.
This from Republicans on Capitol Hill.
Look, I think we often connect things that aren't connected. They're talking about the concept of making a commemorative item for America's 250th birthday. Whose face is on the money does not change the value of the money. It doesn't change anything about the economy. It doesn't change anything about the cost of groceries or gas or anything else. It's a picture on a piece of paper, and Democrats are engaged in their biggest skill, their biggest talent right now, which is to be outraged about everything. I have no idea if the Congress is going to pass this. And if they don't, I won't care. And if they do, I won't care either. But it won't surprise me that the government took steps to do something to commemorate the 250th anniversary of our country. But to say we're going to put a face on a piece of paper and that somehow has an impact on the value of that paper as it relates to the overall economy, I mean, I know Democrats are economically illiterate. I didn't know they were that economically illiterate.
Now, this is probably Scott Jennings' strongest argument in the entire segment. His point is essentially that a commemorative bill doesn't affect inflation, wages, gas prices, or grocery prices. And from a purely economic standpoint, he's right. A commemorative design doesn't change economic conditions. The disagreement comes from whether political symbolism matters. Supporters see it as harmless recognition. Critics see it as another example of elevating Trump personally above the broader national celebration. And that symbolic argument becomes the central issue for the rest of the discussion.
I mean, the reality is that it is sending a signal to the American people that they care more about Donald Trump and his ego than they actually care about providing anything and making their lives easier for them. And I think that is the main point that Democrats are trying to make. I agree with you, Scott. I think we need to commemorate the 250th anniversary. At the same time, it should not be all about Donald Trump. This is not just about Donald Trump. There is more than the 250th anniversary. And so I think that at a time when Americans are struggling, you'll continue to see Democrats trying to talk about those struggles while you have Donald Trump and Republicans rising costs and thinking about things like putting Donald Trump's face wherever they can.
Scott? I mean, Hillary Clinton, as she was pointing it out today, was saying, when responding to the article, was saying that's how much it's going to cost to fill up your gas and get groceries by the end of the president's term. Obviously, that's Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump's former political opponent, saying that. But her point was to the cost of living that is the very real reality for so many Americans right now.
Look, I don't have anything to say about the $250 bill beyond what I've already said politically. I will just say, though, deep down, somewhere inside of me, my uber conservative is screaming, let's not print any more money at all, because every time we print more money, it makes the value of it go down. Lord knows the Democrats spent and printed a bunch of it during the Biden years, and that's what caused the inflation crisis in the first place. So maybe we could all agree, let's just print a little less money and make it worth a little bit more. How about that?
You should call the White House. They'll listen to you, Scott. Tell them not to go forward with this $250 bill.
Scott Jennings, Sochi Hinojosa, thank you both for being here tonight.
This is really where both sides completely diverge. Supporters view these commemorative ideas as honoring a president they admire during a major national milestone. Critics view the exact same actions as evidence that Trump constantly inserts himself into events that should be bigger than any one politician. What's interesting is that the actual debate isn't about currency anymore. It's about whether Trump is the center of the celebration or whether America itself is the center of the celebration. And the closing exchange highlights that divide perfectly. And honestly, this entire debate is less about a $250 bill and more about how people view Donald Trump in general. If you support Trump, you'll probably see this story as another example of critics getting upset over something relatively small. You'll hear Scott Jennings' argument and think, it's just a commemorative item. What's the big deal? If you oppose Trump, you'll probably see this as part of a larger pattern where national institutions, national events, and national symbols increasingly become associated with one political figure. And that's why reactions are so strong. What's interesting is that both sides are technically arguing about different things. One side is arguing about legalities, symbolism, and priorities. The other side is arguing about whether the controversy itself is overblown. That's why these debates often feel like two completely different conversations happening at the same time. The reality is that America's 250th anniversary should be one of the biggest national celebrations in modern history. Ideally, it would be something that brings people together, regardless of political affiliation. But because we're talking about Donald Trump, almost every aspect of the celebration immediately becomes politically charged. And that's really the bigger story here. Not whether a $250 bill ever gets made, but whether America can still have major national moments that aren't instantly pulled into the country's political divide. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Would a commemorative Trump bill be a harmless celebration of America's 250th anniversary? Or do you think it would send the wrong message? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.